The Gunner Chronicles, Fire and Brimstone, by Bard Constantine. Pablo prayed for the strength to die with dignity. He dangled from a noose tight around his neck, hands tied behind him, feet precariously perched upon a pile of loosely stacked stones that threatened to give way at any moment. His neck burned from the rope, but even worse was the thirst. The desert feeling in his throat that matched the sparse surroundings, all dull browns, faded reds, dry heat, and whirling dust. The sun was a merciless tormentor, a raging ball of fire that blistered the skin and baked the sand until it fell apart. In the cloudless sky, a pair of buzzards circled, waiting, patient. 4 other men witnessed his struggle to stay alive. Clyde sat in the shade, while Reggie, Otis, and Jose stood. Laughing drunkenly, they passed a bottle of whiskey back and forth and played their little game of taking a swallow, then tossing rocks at the stone pile, betting on who would be the first to send Pablo to his death. Otis made his throw, missing by a yard. The others laughed, spitting on themselves, staggering like fools. Pablo teetered on the stones, legs cramped, tingling, threatening to go numb. He knew it was only a matter of minutes before they gave out. He'd die anyway, but he fought for every second, soaked with sweat, ignoring the men's mocking jeers. He saw the stranger before they did, a fast-moving speck in the distance leaving a plume of dust behind him. It turned into a man on a rumble bike, silhouette hazy in the grainy dust and blistering heat, rippling like a fever dream under the eye of the blazing sun. Driving across the brownish-orange wilderness of shifting sand, stunted prickly plants, and striated rock formations. Not much else was visible for miles, just heat, dust, rocks, and death. Jose finally turned to Otis, nudging Otis and pointing. Their hands drifted to their sidearms when they realized the bike was heading their way. Reggie lifted a rifle and peered into the scope for a closer look. Clyde didn't bother to stand. He just sat in the shade of the cottonwood tree, lazily fanning himself with his hat. The stranger rolled the bike to a stop at a 20-yard distance, kicking the center stand out and dismounting casually, pausing to pull the dust-caked bandana away from his reddish-brown face. He had the lean, chiseled look of a predator, keen eyes, strong nose, and a square jawline. Faded scars like claw marks ran down the left side of his face, from eyebrow to beard. Twin, long-barreled revolvers hung on either side of his hips. Barely glancing at Pablo, he squinted at the 4 men, taking a thin cheroot from his jacket pocket and sticking it between his teeth. "Don't guess I can bother you boys for a light." The group relaxed just a tad. Reggie shifted his stance, jerking his head at the stranger. "Who the hell are you supposed to be?" "Not supposed to be anyone." Reggie paused, wetting his lips as his eyes shifted from his partners back to the stranger. "Well, what's your name?" "Gunner." "That your first or last name?" Gunner gave the man a hard stare, chewing on the end of his cigar. "Yeah." A confused look flashed across Reggie's beak-nosed face, but his intended reply was cut short by Clyde's deep, rich laughter. "Stand down, Reggie. That man ain't no threat to us. Are you, Mr. Gunner?" "Just passing through. Saw you boys and figured there must be a town nearby." "Figured right. About 4 or 5 miles that-a-way." Clyde jerked a thumb in the northeast direction, eyes glinting under the brow of his hat. "That's a nice machine you're riding. Don't see too many steeds round these parts." Pablo risked a glance at the bike. Longer and wider than most motorcycles, the chassis was protected by armor fairing fashioned into a fierce warhorse. Massive pipes jutted out from the back end, providing jet thrusters for the fusion engine. He didn't know much about bikes, but it looked fast and expensive. Gunner shrugged. It needs some work. Busted suspension and a bad generator, I think. Well, you're in luck, because it just so happens that it's the only stop for the next couple 100 miles or so. Trading center right off the railroad. You should be able to find the parts you need. Maybe even find a sober mechanic if it's a good day. I'm Clyde. You met Reggie, and the other two were Otis and Jose. We're from the town. Had to come out here to get rid of this dead weight. He spat in Pablo's direction. Gunner removed his cowboy hat, shaking the dust off before placing it back over his tangled mane of dark, wavy hair. You rode 5 miles from town just to hang a man? Had to. Our gallows broke down from the last hanging. Fat bastard was nearly 400 pounds. Ended up shooting him in the head after he snapped the timber instead of his neck. And since there ain't no good trees around town, we had to ride way out here to this cottonwood tree. That's why we're taking our sweet time with this preacher man. Since we had to come all the way out here, I guess we might as well enjoy it. He grinned, exposing his tobacco-stained teeth. Gunner gave him a hard look. You're hanging a preacher? Clyde spat again, leaving a string of drool across his chin. That's what he calls himself. Came into town stirring up the folks about repentance and the wages of sin. Claims God is bringing divine judgment against the town. Got the judge rat sore about it, so he had us put a noose around his neck to see if the preacher's God is able to save his sorry hide. So far, he ain't showed up. He and his men burst into raucous laughter. Gunner didn't even crack a smile. This judge always hanging folks for preaching? Clyde tipped back a flask, swallowing brown liquor. Wiping his mouth, he gave Gunner a cockeyed stare. The judge hangs who he wants to hang. He runs the town. So long as his pay is good, we got no problem stringing up folks he wants strung up. That's right, Reggie said. And we don't care for no stranger poking their nose in our business neither. Gunner ignored him, keeping his gaze on Clyde. If you're hanging a man for preaching the word of God, then you're hanging him for the worst reason. You stood here, put a noose on the man's neck, placed him on a pile of rocks and laughed while he fought to live? Looks like you've had your fun. Why don't you go ahead and cut him loose? Clyde paused in the act of raising the flask, eyes narrowing. What did you just say? The tension became instantly palpable. Reggie fumbled with his rifle. Jose and Otis looked up from the bottle they were sharing. Clyde's hand drifted to the pear-handled revolver, strategically placed on the ground beside him. Pablo struggled to keep from hanging himself. Gunner's eyes flicked from one to the next, taking in their bloated, sweaty faces, the empty bottles on the ground, the way the men shifted and refused to meet his gaze, except for Clyde, whose face twisted into a cruel sneer. Looks like we got us a hero, boys. Tell you what, hero, I got extra rope, and there's plenty of branches left. You want to join up with the preacher? We can arrange it for you. If you don't, you'd better go on and get while you can still walk. We'll take that sweet steed off your hands for the trouble, of course. Drunken chuckles all around. Gunner focused on Clyde. You ready to meet the Reaper? Clyde blinked. What? You heard me. You've been out here drinking hard in the hot sun, standing round, muscles getting locked up, reflexes slowed, dehydrated. Reggie over there has shaky hands. He's scared witless. Otis and Jose are just here for the liquor. They won't be any good. So I'll ask you again. Are you looking to die? Because that is all you're gonna do if you don't cut that man down in the next 2 seconds. Clyde spat, reaching for his gun. His partners cursed as they clumsily went for theirs as well. Gunner drew his long-barreled auto-revolver and fired 3 times by the time Clyde's fingers touched the grip. The bodies were already crumpling to the ground when he raised the weapon. Gunner spun, dropping to one knee as Clyde pulled the trigger. His shot missed going wide over Gunner's head. Gunner's didn't. Clyde jerked twice. red mist exploding from his chest. His eyes bulged, staring in disbelief as he fell backwards and slammed into the ground in a heavy cloud of dust. The echoes of the shots still rang in the air, crashing in the distance like soft thunder. Gunner turned and fired again, splitting the rope that Pablo dangled from, catching him as he fell and easing him to the ground. Pablo immediately clawed at the noose around his neck. "Easy, Padre," Gunner said, helping him remove it. "Take it easy." Pablo doubled over, hacking and coughing as he massaged the bruised flesh of his neck. "Gracias, mi amigo. I think I will be all right." "All right, Padre," Gunner stood, reloading as he surveyed the dusty landscape. "Best you get to moving, then. Only a matter of time before somebody checks up on these stiffs. Can you ride?" "I think so." "Even better." Gunner glanced at the sand cycles the dead men had parked in the dirt, 2 side by side, one in the shade beyond Clyde's corpse. Clicking back the revolver hammer ignited a humming sound from his weapon. The resulting blast detonated 2 of the sand cycles, engulfing them in flames. The flames crackled, creating thick plumes of black smoke. Gunner used the nearest flames to light his cheroot before kneeling to rummage through the men's pockets. Pablo shakily stood, looking at the corpses with dazed slowness. "You killed them all." "Better them than you or me, Padre." Gunner pulled a small bag from Clyde's belt pouch, reaching in to withdraw a handful of gold bullion cards. He stuffed the bag into his inner jacket pocket. "A man as swift on the draw as you surely could have wounded them instead." Gunner gave him an irritating glance. "Sure. And then maybe a day goes by, maybe 2 months, maybe 10 years. But eventually, they find me down the road. Only this time there's more of them. Now I gotta kill 24 men instead of 4 men. Does that strike your fancy, Padre?" "Killing never strikes my fancy, Vaquero. But please forgive me. I don't mean to sound ungrateful for your assistance. Many a man would have just passed by." "The thought crossed my mind." Gunner strode to his steed and hopped on the saddle. "You from around here, Padre?" "For many years, Vaquero." "You seen a man with red eyes pass through?" Pablo hesitated, shaking his head. "I do not think so, amigo. You'd know him if you saw him. Sometimes he wears a man's face, sometimes his face is a death mask, but the eyes are always the same, red and bright like freshly spilled blood. I never laid eyes on such a man, if he is a man at all. I see something in your face when you mention this person. You're pursuing him for vengeance." "Retribution, Padre." "Different word, same meaning. You should abandon this path you're on, Vaquero. Violence only begets more of the same. It's a demon that eats away at you the longer you embrace him." "Trying to save my soul, Padre?" Gunner tossed Pablo a canteen of water. "Don't bother. Me and my demons get along just fine." Gunning the throttle, he took off in a cloud of stinging dust, leaving Pablo alone with the dead.